This video is going to talk about transport of carbon dioxide through the body. Now, unlike oxygen, where 1.5% is going to be dissolved in plasma, and the rest is going to be so 98.5% is going to be on hemoglobin. Carbon dioxide is going to be a little kind of more varied. 7% of carbon dioxide is just going to be dissolved in the plasma. So remember all of the stuff besides the cells. So it's just going to be dissolved, flowing with plasma. 23% actually can bind to hemoglobin itself. So it can bind to the hemoglobin and travel that way. Most of it is going to travel as it's going to be transformed into a bicarbonate ion, so HCO3. And that's 70% of it is going to travel that. Then that is going to be dissolved in plasma. So this is going to be, how do we make a bicarbonate ion? We add carbon dioxide and water, so CO2 and H2O, and we make an intermediate form of carbonic acid. Then we release a proton or a hydrogen atom, and then this is the bicarbonate. So looking at this is why we can say if you have more carbon dioxide inside your body, then more is transformed to carbonic acid, and you can have more hydrogen ions or protons. What makes up an acid? More hydrogen ions equals more acidic. So this is why we say carbon dioxide can act as an acid or be more acidic inside the body. So I mentioned that in previous videos, and that's going to come into play a lot when we talk about chemoreception later on in another video. So again, conversion of carbon dioxide, you add water to carbonic acid. This happens inside the red blood cell. So carbon dioxide is converted to carbonic acid inside the red blood cells, not associated with the hemoglobin, but inside the red blood cells. Most of it, again, 70%, is going to be converted to carbonic acid. This is a reversible reaction, meaning it goes both ways. And it's done by the enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. So reversible means it can go this to carbonic acid, and then it can also go the other way. So carbon dioxide plus water equals carbonic acid. H2CO3 is carbonic acid. Carbonic acid then dissociates, not all of it, but it dissociates into a bicarbonate ion and hydrogen ions. So then we get this. This is also reversible, meaning it goes both ways. So carbonic acid, you get HCO3 minus, and you get an H plus, which is a proton. Again, more acidic. The hydrogen ion or the proton actually can bind to a different part, not the iron, but different part of hemoglobin that can help with pH buffering. The bicarbonate ion that's created inside the red blood cells then travels into the plasma to be transported. So it goes from the red blood cells into the plasma and dissolves there. When bicarbonate ions are leaving the red blood cells, this is a lot of negative charges that leaving. So we need an equal amount of negative charge that goes back in, or we're going to make red blood cells positively charged because they're losing so many negatives. So what happens is bicarbonate ions leave and go into the plasma, and chloride ions, Cl-, move into the red blood cells from the plasma. This is what we call the chloride shift, because chloride is moving into the red blood cells to balance that change in negative. Because again, if you're losing all the negative charges, then you're going to make red blood cells charged, and you don't want that. So you still want them to have an even, equal charge, so chloride's going to oppose that. So this is just picture form. So carbon dioxide is coming in. So 7% is going to be in plasma, so it's dissolved in the plasma. Carbon dioxide then goes, most of it's going into the red blood cells. So again, this is not dealing with oxygen, different from hemoglobin, at least in this part. So most of the carbon dioxide is going to be converted to carbonic acid in here, and that's done by carbonic anhydrase. Remember, ASE is always an enzyme. Carbonic acid molecules dissociate into that hydrogen ion and the bicarbonate ion. Bicarbonate then leaves the red blood cells and dissolves into the plasma, and chloride comes in because you want to make sure that you don't make red blood cells positively charged because they're losing negative. So you bring in the negative, and that's the chloride ions, and you have what we call the chloride shift because chloride's coming in. But obviously, opposite way, then chloride's going to leave, and bicarbonate ions are going to come back in. So we kind of have the opposite happen. About the rest, 23% of the carbon dioxide is actually bound to hemoglobin. It's going to be different where actual oxygen's going to be. Some of the oxygen can bind to the iron, but it's going to be a different part of the hemoglobin. So some hemoglobin is going to carry carbon dioxide. And when carbon dioxide is attached to hemoglobin molecules, it's going to be carbaminohemoglobin. So most of the most of the carbon dioxide is going to be traveling by bicarbonate ions, but we can have it attached to the actual hemoglobin. Then we have the hydrogen ions that are going to stay in the red blood cells, and so they can be the pH buffer. And so the red blood cells are going to keep that hydrogen ions in case we need to go the opposite, so that they're not going out into the plasma, necessarily changing plasma pH, because it's held in to the red blood cells. So hydrogen ions are staying inside the red blood cells. If you get an increase of red blood cells or hydrogen ions in the red blood cells, then some is going to leak out and cause kind of that decrease in pH in plasma. So this is happening, this part is happening going from tissues, because tissues are going to be producing carbon dioxide, into the systemic capillaries. So this is happening at internal respiration. This is external respiration because we're going pulmonary capillaries to the alveoli. So all the things that we just talked about are going in reverse because we want to make carbon dioxide and water so that carbon dioxide can go into the alveoli and be released and breathed out through pulmonary ventilation. So bicarbonate ions move from the plasma into the red blood cells, and then we get the opposing where chloride moves out of the red blood cells and black into plasma. So we have that shift back because, again, we want to go opposite, negatives and negatives, so we have an even charge. The hydrogen ions that are still in the red blood cells and being held are going to be added to our bicarbonate ions, and we're going to get carbonic acid. So we're going to get back to that. which then can split by carbonic anhydrase, can split it into carbon dioxide and water, and then we get rid of it. So it's traveled from systemic all the way to pulmonary, and then is released by the alveoli. So again, this is the pickup. So this is going to be internal respiration. This is external respiration. Overview. Carbon dioxide is made by the tissue cells into the interstitial fluid, goes into the capillaries, and then goes into the red blood cells. You add water to it, and you get carbonic acid through carbonic anhydrase. That splits to hydrogen ion, which stays with hemoglobin, stays with the red blood cells, and a bicarbonate ion that leaves and goes back into the plasma. And since you're losing that negative charge, we need to make sure we equalize it. So chloride's going to move in and hang out in the chloride shift. Then everything opposite. So bicarbonate comes into the red blood cells from the plasma. We need to get rid of carbon dioxide. Chloride's going to move back out. You're going to take that hydrogen that's attached to the hemoglobin and add it to your bicarbonate ions that are coming in, and you're going to make carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is going to release the water, and you're going to get carbon dioxide and water. And it's going to diffuse into the alveoli because, again, partial pressures are going to change. So remember, partial pressure is CO2, so it moves in, is higher here than here. And then you're going to have a higher partial pressure here and lower here, so it's going to move out. You also have some that's attached to the hemoglobin that's also going to do the same thing. So remember, 23% is actually attached to the hemoglobin. That'll just be released by the hemoglobin and into the alveoli. But 70% is happening in bicarbonate ions. And then the other 7% is just in plasma and just goes right into. So just looking at it, differences. So oxygen transport, 98.5% is just bound to hemoglobin, bound to the iron molecule in the hemoglobin. Carbon dioxide, most is bicarbonate ions, but it does have the plasma part and attached to hemoglobin part as well. So it's a little more complicated with that. You can watch that video on your own.